The birth of the ISCCL, a history of IFLA, and the birth of the International Committee of Gardens and Historic Sites. Over the past 40 or 50 years, ideas and philosophical approaches to heritage have evolved enormously. And no doubt, here, when we speak of gardens, the memory of history finds one of its justifications. We would like to remember how IFLA, the International Federation of Landscape Architects, and the International Committee on Historic Gardens and Sites in ICOMOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, were founded. We will recall these developments via René Pecher's personal notes. He died on the 9th of May, 2002. He was 94 years old. Just before the Second World War, the World's Fairs were the occasion for initial meetings. During the Brussels Exposition in 1935, a few garden architects were interested in the matter of historic gardens. 2 years later, at the Paris exhibition in 1937, the team had grown considerably. The German officials invited this group the following year, in 1938, to come to Berlin and the Rhineland. In Berlin, those officials had proposed to found an international federation in the city. During a private meeting, however, the youngest members of the group forged a lasting friendship. These young professionals decided to fight for the cause of gardens, and that is what they did, in a period when gardens were not fashionable in the way that they have since become once again. A meeting took place at the invitation of the United Kingdom in 1948 and was a great success. There were perhaps 150 participants, but practical results, zero. They were invited one afternoon for a boat trip on the Thames, where chance or providence meant that René Pecher was sitting opposite Sir Geoffrey Jellicoe, who had chaired the meeting. Seeing that Sir Geoffrey was pensive and worried, he took the liberty of saying to him, "Since we will end our meeting at Jesus College, Cambridge, why not invite a representative of each country to come there to found an international federation? If there are 15 or 20 of us, we can make a decision, but not if there are 150 of us. We cannot leave without achieving a result." Sir Geoffrey looked at him, then changed the subject. But the next day, the meeting was convened. He chaired it with patience, calm, and firmness. Finally, the decision was taken subject to the agreement on their return of the various national associations. That is how Sir Geoffrey founded IFLA. That was in 1948. From that pioneering era, the majority of participants have died. The representatives of the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Switzerland, Portugal, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany, Italy, of course, Belgium. But I have skipped a few because the archives mention 15 founding countries. Historic gardens were considered as being backward-looking as an object of study and outdated. Nevertheless, a committee on historic gardens and sites was founded at the General Assembly of IFLA in Sardinia in 1968, and René Pecher was placed in charge. He developed the theme, "Nothing comes from nothing, and everything you will be in future is based on your past and on what you are at present." With the assistance of a German colleague, Gerda Gollwitzer, as a first step, they drew up a list of historic gardens of the world. They were appalled to discover that there were barely 2,000, which was tiny in comparison with the number of historic monuments. They realized that they would have to broaden their sources of information and form a team consisting not only of landscape architects, but art historians, architects, botanists, and archaeologists. That was when René Pecher consulted Professor Raymond Lemaire, who was Secretary General of ICOMOS at the time, and its president, Piero Bazzola. After many months of hesitation or even doubt about the fundamental raison d'etre of historic gardens, he was asked to start by organizing a colloquium every 2 years with logistic support from ICOMOS and to set up a mixed committee with IFLA. René Pecher had meanwhile trained a team selected from among experts who were not representing their country, but their competency, while making sure that a certain balance was maintained. In 1971, the first meeting of the new committee was held at the Chateau Fontainebleau. What is a historic garden? It's an architectural and historical composition of interest to the public from the historical or artistic point of view. This definition was discussed and finalized by the 20 experts who meet at this first colloquium on historic gardens in Fontainebleau in 1971. Having had 10 years to assess its merits, the Florence Charter took up that definition and added, as such, it is to be considered a monument. This concept had been suggested initially during a working meeting at Bruges by Mr. Jacques Rayboc, who was then director of the Heritage Administration of the French-speaking community of the country of Belgium, to ensure that historic gardens benefited from the same protection as monuments. It is true that the concept of monument takes the garden out of its context as a site and contributes to guaranteeing its long-term survival. The Florence Charter was adopted on December 15, 1982 by ICOMOS, with a view to supplementing the Venice Charter in this specific field of gardens. It was a first in this field. The spirit of the Venice Charter was faced with a living monument whose conservation was subject to specific rules. The historic gardens are memory. They are also Bible or grammar. The survival of gardens very often is therefore the result of an oral tradition and a desire for maintenance. Parks and gardens, vegetable gardens, cloisters, botanical gardens, cemeteries, and more. Each one is the witness of a specific historical, artistic, or traditional value. It is the reflection of a certain form of life, even of a civilization, often to its optimum point.